4 of MTGO Masters.
Pro Tour champion and Legacy champion. Not a bad start.
I know, right?
Not a bad start at all. Though
It's
Jake's
a
hand is
pretty
not. Jake's hand's
good.
not great.
Jarvis's hand, however, looks pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, good enough, right? Like,
Yeah,
not the
it's a good
best
7.
hand. Yeah, not the best hand from Yawgmoth we've ever seen, because naturally it does not contain the card Yawgmoth, though it does contain a way to find it. Port of Calling. Jake's hand is without Ragavan, which is actually where you prefer to be in the matchup because it's pretty poor in the matchup, as mentioned
Yeah.
previously. But he doesn't have a great start either. So these are two
sure.
pretty modest hands in my opinion.
For sure. It's going to be a fairly slow start, I think, while Jake and Jarvis get everything set up. And we have Jake here firing off a lightning bolt to deal with that ignoble hierarch.
Yeah, oddly enough, Jarvis having a main deck copy of Fulminator Mage in his deck, actually coming after you and I, as opposed to Jake. Fortunately for Jake, he's got a timely thought seize. I think he's almost certainly going to have to select Fulminator Mage given the lack of mana.
Yes. One thing also to note that Jake is running 2 Magus of the Moons in the main board as a hunch against Amulet, Titan, and Tron. So that is also quite rude of Jake to do that.
Yeah, we've got some real haters in the house between Jarvis and Jake here. You and I might have to get a little lucky here.
We're gonna need to be lucky, but we're also gonna probably have the quickest round of Magic ever when we play each other. So
ideally.
Yeah, ideally. If things go to plan.
One of these new surveil lands. I have to get used to people searching for these end of turn now.
Yeah, they're pretty good, I hear.
They are not bad at all. Same can be said for Grist, which is the best thing going on right now in this game.
Yeah. And we just want Jake to draw that second land. There we go. So at least Jake can fire off this Bowmasters to do something. But it's looking a little difficult because this Grist is going to be sticking around for quite a while.
Yeah, I mean, this game was looking like a bit of a non-game. Now it's turning into something that resembles a game. Really important.
Yep.
Really important that turn that Jake was actually able to draw that land. Scavenging Ooze isn't a bad draw here for Jarvis, though. Jarvis isn't underneath anything resembling pressure right now, so he can kind of take his time to get set up with these Court of Callings, which are effectively expensive copies of Yawgmoth.
Yep. And this Grist is just going to stick around for a while. Look, there's the Yawgmoth in the graveyard, unfortunately, but looks like this Court of Calling will be fired off.
Yeah, so it looks like
he's touches mana.
Yeah, it looks like you're going to do this for 2.
Yeah,
I figured this could just be a Bowmasters killing the opposing Bowmasters and making an army. Yeah.
Smart. Yeah, Jarvis will play. Jake will play the second Bowmasters, dealing with that Bowmasters. It just feels very rock, paper, scissors at the moment with Orcish Bowmasters.
Yeah, and on this exchange here, again, this is very positive for Jarvis. Losing a Bowmasters, yes, but the Grist has a ton of loyalty on it still at 3. It has optionality on what it wants to do here. Jarvis is just going to make an insect, has a Court of Calling, can go get Yawgmoth now.
Yeah.
And generally, the game ends when Yawgmoth's battlefield looks like this.
Yes. Especially as Jake just has no pressure, not really any lands. These scam cards are basically dead in his hand as well. So it's basically the Jarvis Yi show at the moment.
Yeah, this one is I'm not going to call it over just yet, but it's pretty darn close. Yawgmoth being able to actually start using its ability, taking care of the Bowmaster first, doesn't have to rush to take care of the army. Jarvis can play a Blooming Marsh this turn or a Dryad Arbor. It doesn't really matter which land. Playing a Dryad Arbor, of course, is another creature for Yawgmoth. Playing the Blooming Marsh is just more mana down the road. And as you mentioned, Jake's draws here have not been particularly good. Emphasized there by that shield.
Yeah. And it looks like Jake has just conceded the game just because just didn't quite get there. While that Polluted Delta was drawn at the right time, it just wasn't quite enough. So when it comes to sideboarding, what are you looking for? So like as Jake's on the play, what would you bring in against Yawgmoth as the scam player?
Well, Jake is looking towards these Blood Moon effects. I'm curious if they're going to stay or go. Wouldn't be surprised if the Yawgmoths leave the deck. Excuse me, if the Ragamans leave the deck.
Yeah.
That's a pretty easy place to start. Looks like there's a couple copies of Curse Totem in the sideboard. I know you've got some of those in your sideboard
Yeah.
too for Jarvis and Yawgmoth, so I wouldn't be surprised to see those come in here. You could also make an argument for boarding in Legion's End and Pity Needle as well. So a couple of decent options here for Jake. Jarvis's deck, I don't think is going to change a ton, but you can see as Jake kind of lined up all those cards all at once, he's clearly got a game plan here for Yawgmoth.
He has beaten Yawgmoth a few times, leading his way to Pro Tour Lord of the Rings victory. So I imagine it's a very familiar matchup, even without Fury now.
Yeah, we saw that. We see the totems, we see the cauldrons, the Legion's
Nice
ends.
one as well.
Yeah, so he's got a configuration that he's happy with.
A very nice Yawgmoth hit. As for Jarvis, let's see what he sideboarded in because we're busy on Rakdos. But hopefully he'll have a bit more of a game this time around, and Jake can keep a decent 7 or 6.
Yeah, this hand that Jake has here is fine. Not the most exciting thing in the world because you're not going full crazy with grief. You'd rather the Shieldred be one of the ways to get grief back.
Absolutely.
But other than that, I still think this is a hand that you're going to keep, and the grief hands get stronger the more the Jarvis continues to mulligan. So,
Yeah.
Jake not going to send this hand back.
No. And it looks like Jarvis kept a hand with 2 Yawgmoths, which is what you want to see as the namesake card of the deck.
And one thing that I like that Jake is doing here is not firing off grief on turn number 1. There's nothing that scary that Jarvis can do on turn 1, so it benefits Jake to play a Dauthi Voidwalker on turn 2 and then grief. But if he's able to draw Not Dead After All, which Jake quits, it makes his grief turn way better. Now he actually has a decision to make on if he wants to do Dauthi Voidwalker into grief and maybe hit something awesome, or maybe not anything at all on turn 2 and maybe try to go nuts on turn 3.
I think that one of the biggest strengths to Jake as a Magic player and as someone who's played a lot of Rakdos Evoke is just the patience of knowing when to quote unquote scam the opponent. It's very easy just to trigger happy and on turn 1, as you said at the start of this round. But it looks like Jake's going to go with the Delphi Boardwalker and play it patient for the time being.
Yeah, just going to wait because can go absolutely crazy here on turn number 3 with grief plus Not Dead at all. And again, not underneath anything resembling pressure. A couple of mana accelerants will join the battlefield, sure. But the good cards are in hand, but not for that much longer, I have a feeling.
Yeah. See what Jake takes here. Double grief, double Yawgmoth, double grist, double Yawgmoth is not quite what you want to see, but
yeah, this is a little awkward. Like, how do you want to poke a hole in this hand as you're griefing? Naturally, when the planeswalkers are redundant, they're not really that scary. Also, the ability to take a Yawgmoth here might be incredibly, not only to take one Yawgmoth, but take both Yawgmoths and then have a Yawgmoth of your own via the Dauthi Voidwalker might be very, very attractive here moving forward.
Yeah.
So.
What would you take here?
I think I was going to say Yawgmoth. Jake is clearly not agreeing with me, and one of us is a Pro Tour champion. So I'm going to guess that what he's doing is probably better than what I was considering. So both the grists are going to bite the dust.
Interesting.
And I guess now if you want a Voidwalker, for a grist, you can.
Oof.
I guess you cast this. Yeah, I guess you cast this, make an insect, and the next turn you can start either picking off mana accelerants, or if Jarvis's turn is just cast Yawgmoth, it's not the scariest thing in the world.
Absolutely. Also, it was worth noting how Jake exiled the Molten Collapse as part of
Mhm.
the grief cost and not the Shouldered Apocalypse. Respecting the fact that Shouldered is actually quite good in the late game, he feels confident this game's going to go long enough where Shoulder is going to have an impact.
Yeah, yeah, that is a very notable thing as far as the decision is concerned. So now I'm curious to see how Jake is going to kind of. It's weird to say work through Yawgmoth because there's an on the battlefield answer, but
Yes.
Jarvis can kind of respond in kind in some forms here. So
Yeah. The very reactive and resilient deck we have here. So we'll see what Jake wants to do with this Grist. Looks like we're just going to be slamming a Sheoldred and then maybe taking up this Grist to deal with the Yawgmoth. The first Yawgmoth, at least.
yeah, and actually, playing Shielded first makes a lot of sense because this means that Jarvis has to respond.
Yep.
Jarvis will respond by sacrificing the Delighted Halfling to take care of the insect token. Now, of course, Yawgmoth is going to draw a card with 4 Shielders on the battlefield, so Jarvis is going to
Mhm.
save a little bit of life right now. Going to take 1 from sacking the creature as opposed to 3 from sacking the creature and then drawing a card with Shielded on the battlefield. The next question is what does Jake do now with the Grist, which has not been activated yet this turn?
Yeah. I would be tempted just to make another token, try again next turn. I don't really want to be sacrificing a Grief or a Sheoldred into a Yawgmoth.
Well, I like starting here with the Grief attack because Jarvis has no
I
good
agree.
blocks. So
Yeah.
step number 1 is done. Step 2 is a little bit more complicated, I think. You can certainly make an argument for sacrificing Grief here to kill a Yawgmoth, but you know that your opponent has another one.
Yeah.
Now, the Grist trigger brings it down to 2, and then you can sacrifice a creature. And so now this goes on the stack. I guess also you've got the little trigger here from the Wicked counter. But now Yawgmoth is gone. You know your opponent has Yawgmoth and 2 mystery cards.
Yeah.
And that's effectively a whiff there for Jarvis. Jarvis
Yeah.
can cord for
Fourth Dried
Dryad
Arbor.
Arbor. Yeah, but that's really about it.
That's not exciting though, is it? Not
Not at this stage. Not at this stage of things. Jake
this.
is getting a decent little stranglehold on the game.
Yeah. What Jarvis needs is lands, like Jake needed in the first game.
Yeah, Lance would help. Cording for a Dryad Arbor is kind of a solve to that problem in the short term.
Yeah.
But as Jarvis kind of mentioned at the top in our little 6-person segment, Yawgmoth's a critical mass deck, and right now
Yeah.
it doesn't have a critical mass of anything going on.
Yeah.
In a perfect world, you're able to build towards that critical mass with cards like Grist and Court of
Yeah.
Calling. But both of the Grists that were drawn this game, of course, were taken by Grief. One Yawgmoth has been dealt with. Dryad Arbor from this Court of Calling here is fine, but again, I guess it's Delighted Halfling because the Wall of Roots can tap for a mana, so
Yeah.
he can search for a 1 there. But again, none of this is terribly exciting in a deck that's looking to be a critical mass deck.
Yeah. Looks like Jake is getting a slow hold on this deck, and it just proves how important taking those 2 Grists were at the when the Grief came down, and being able to cast one of them and use it against your opponent's pretty good, I hear.
Yeah, yeah, it's not a bad thing at all. And
We'll
now
see what
Jarvis has got to try to figure out if there's a way to kind of wiggle himself out of this situation, which doesn't seem to be the easiest thing.
No, you can play a Yawgmoth, but that doesn't really do anything. This Reclamation Sage is looking a little sad, and you just hold up this Quarter Calling of Bowmasters and hope to get there.
Yeah, so I guess a thing that Jarvis could do is you can cast the Bowmasters with your 2 mana. Actually, I guess you would want to actually do it with a land and then a Wall of Roots. So
Hmm.
you do that. Let's see. Let's just assume that your Blooming Marsh is tapped. You have Bowmaster. You have an army token. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 creatures plus a Wall of Roots is a 5th mana source, and then Overgrown Tomb is a 6th mana source. So you could go you could go Bowmasters plus Cord for 3 on your opponent's turn. Not entirely sure what Cord for 3 would yield right now, but that's probably the best thing to be done.
You could cord for grist, right?
Yeah, that's an option. So here comes Bowmaster. Probably the army token just probably gonna chump.
Yeah. Jarvis is on 6, so he's still this shielder is gonna finish off the game quite quickly. So there's gonna be some chump blocking here.
Also worth noting right now that Jarvis is at 6, gonna go down to 3.
It's a 1.
And then Shieldred effectively putting him at 1, but we could also cord right now for a 2. The 2 could be like something Blood Artist adjacent.
Blood Artist, yeah. Is that a poke up fruit?
Yeah, something like that.
Try and wiggle himself out of this really difficult situation.
Yeah, the biggest problem here right now for Jarvis, and this is a problem that you see from Yawgmoth players, is when you're getting beaten down like this, it makes your actual card Yawgmoth bad because it requires life to work with, and you don't really have much of that.
The Jarvis decided to take the Scavenging Ooze. It's another way to gain life while also just keeping Jake's graveyard pretty clean against this with this grist in play.
Yeah, right now in Jake's graveyard there are 3 creatures: a Voidwalker, a Grief, and a Bowmasters. Jarvis's graveyard, there's a Yawgmoth. It looks like Jake is going to use the grist to take care of the ooze, putting a priority on that, and really just hoping that Shieldred is able to hold the fort down.
Yep. As Jake just keeps drawing into lands, unfortunately. Ooh, we have a tie game so far.
We do. Jake is going to win that one.
Yep. Proving that just taking both those grists was just like the winning, like one of the winning plays there. I would have taken both Yawgmoths just because it's like the namesake card, but as you said, Jake's won a Pro Tour and I haven't. So
yeah, that's why I'm going to default to him. Now, what's interesting here is Jarvis is bringing back Thoughtseizes in on the play. He looks like he's boarding out a cord. His Zilliport Cutthroat is in the sideboard. So he's changed things, given that he's on the play this game as opposed to on the draw. Obviously, games change depending on who has the initiative in the game. Initiative being the play draw, not initiative the horrible mechanic. So,
like that one in Vintage Cube?
A time or two until they don't let me anymore.
It looks like both players managed to keep a decent 7 here, which is good to see. And Jarvis has an Agra Soul Cauldron, a card that we haven't seen for a little while in this match so far.
Yeah, they both have one in their hand right now, which could make for some unique back and forth. The Thoughtseize is going to kick things off here for Jake to get an idea of what Jarvis is working with, and it's actually going to take the Soul Cauldron from Jarvis. So Jake is putting a priority on not having that be on the battlefield because he'd like his to be as best it can be.
Yeah. And here comes the Delphi Voidwalker. It looks like Jarvis is going to respond by putting a Bowmasters into play, just trying to flesh out that main battlefield due to this Yawgmoth being in hand. The more creatures in play, better Yawgmoth gets.
Yeah, and Jarvis is doing a nice job, at least so far, of just critical massing. So play a Wall of Roots pre-combat, play another Bowmaster. I got a Yawgmoth in my hand. You know I have this Yawgmoth in my hand, so I don't think that Yawgmoth is going to be there longer. But hoping to maybe fade a discard spell. Jake obviously has one right now. And then Jake also has, as mentioned, that Agatha Soul's Cauldron as well. So this makes for a little bit of an interesting game here on how to move forward, because you definitely don't want Yawgmoth to hit the battlefield. And you have a lot of control over that.
It looks like Jake is just going to fire off this Legion's End, just ripping out the Bowmasters on the battlefield.
Now the Grief is going to take care of the Yawgmoth. Last card in hand here for Jarvis is Beseiju, which is a clean answer to the Agatha Soul Cauldron. And now Jake is going to get.
Yeah.
Gotta assume Yawgmoth.
Yeah. It's one cool thing about Rakdos Evoke is just how it can just play the opponent's deck. Especially when
It's
stuff like Ragavan is not very good against Yawgmoth, you still have this just agency with Delphi Voidwalker that's just got great value. It got a Grist last game and now it's got a Yawgmoth.
Yeah, and Jake with a pretty darn good draw step here
Yeah.
in Fable the Mirror Breaker for a couple of reasons. One, it generates a creature here for Yawgmoth and the Goblin token. Two, it's a card that Jarvis is, I'm not going to say forced to use Boseiju on, but it's a card that I think he's incentivized to use it on. And by having to manage that, it actually opens the door up for the Agatha Soul Cauldron down the road, which is an important card in the matchup. So not a bad draw step there for Jake, though Jarvis is not going to overreact yet.
Yep. And it looks like Jarvis is going to fire off this Boseiju. He's contemplating it. He's unsure.
Yeah, this is a
It's
difficult spot here
tempting.
for Jarvis.
It's very tempting, right?
Yeah, you don't want your opponent to draw two cards and potentially find some good stuff when you're both kind of playing a resource light game right now, too. So it looks like this Fable is just going to hang tight. Now Jarvis is going to let it rip.
Yeah. And this gives Jake let's see what's going to. I assume Jake's just discarded the Cauldron as part of the Fable of the Mirror Breaker chapter. Oh no, there is. It's just cut off screen.
Yeah.
So that gives Jake free realm just to play the Soul Cauldron now because Jarvis is empty-handed.
Yeah. If that's the move he wants to make right now, which does make a lot of sense. So now the Soul Cauldron's on the battlefield. Jarvis is without an answer to that. So that's what made the Fable a pretty nice draw. And now Jarvis is in the position where it's kind of Yawgmoth or bust here, which means it's also Court of Calling or bust, because there's enough creatures on the battlefield to be able to court or just actually draw a Yawgmoth. So that's where the focus on this game has really turned to here for the Yawgmoth player.
And Jake can just take his time, pick away at the threats, and just put them under the Soul Cauldron and get the effects just for good measure. Like Agatha's Soul Cauldron is just such a powerful card. I don't think people realized how strong it was once Wilds of Eldraine came out.
Yeah, it's a really unique card. It has some text that's a little bit different. Insofar as like it does a lot. It's a little unintuitive on exactly how it works, but once you kind of go through the motions of learning how it works, really, really good card. And it will have an impact on this game if it does get to hang around for a little while. Now, weirdly enough, one of the things about Jake's deck is that as good as the deck as Rakdos Scam is, it doesn't play the most creatures like Yawgmoth does. So we're not going to see actual Yawgmoth kind of go off here for Jake. It's just going to be a big creature that is going to do some weird stuff here in proliferating itself to grow larger. And
it can also do that thing.
Counter.
It can also do that thing that Yawgmoth doesn't often do, and that's attack.
Yep.
Yawgmoth can get aggressive. I notice a lot of Golgari Yawgmoth players like to keep things very combo focused and very reactive. But sometimes just turn sideways, they will also be dead. And when you've got like a 5/7 that's just progressively getting bigger through the Soul Cauldron, it's going to be a lot harder to deal with.
So here's Court of Calling for Jarvis, which
he does have Reclamation Sage in his deck, I believe, as a target.
Yeah, so we saw access to Reclamation Sage in game number 2. It may be in the deck for game 3. It may not be. But again, this gets the opportunity to act as a Yawgmoth for the moment. At its ceiling, presumably it's Yawgmoth. It could be Core for Grist. Kill your Yawgmoth because it's pretty evident that Jake has nothing. Obviously, we can see the hands, but if Jake had anything, he would do something. So
He is rich on mana right now.
It might just be grist time.
I think grist time is a pretty
Mhm.
good call here. Deal with this Yawgmoth.
And now that the dynamic on this game has changed a little bit right now, Jake does have good draw steps. Don't get it twisted. And Fatal Push is the best of the bunch. That's for
Yeah.
sure. But this game is starting to shift a little bit. And as one thing that has kind of taken place over the course of this game, too, is that Jake has mostly felt in control of this game while Jarvis has been climbing uphill. Jake is at 8. So it's not like
That
he
is
has
a
a lot
good
of
draw.
life to work with.
That is a pretty good draw in Agha's Soul
Yeah.
Cauldron. That will do a lot of things with the grist in play.
Now, when the Soul Cauldrons kind of battle back and forth, if you're Jarvis, you target something, Jake responds by targeting something himself, stuff like that. So this can get a little bit messy. So Jake is going to immediately activate the Soul Cauldron right now to take care of the Yawgmoth. Now Jarvis is going to make an insect with Grist, and then will he activate his Soul Cauldron?
And he
Yes.
will to get that wall of roots. Now everything is a wall of roots.
Well, not a bad Fatal Push there for someone who's at 8 life. So let's see what
Yeah.
Jake draws. That is
Gets
odd.
fine.
That's
Gets grief back.
it's oddly online because right now is Takanuma.
Yes. You can get this grief back. Grief can chip in. Jarvis is still on 14, which is a bit higher, I think, than Jake would like. But
There's also the potential to hit something like pretty good here, like Orcish Bowmasters.
sure.
Didn't hit anything particularly good, so it just has a grief.
The grief is fine considering this Soul Cauldron's also tapped, so Jarvis can't respond.
Now Jarvis does have a clean answer to this on the battlefield. Would have to use the last 2 loyalty counters on Grist and sacrifice the insect token to take care of the grief.
It's a lot of resources to deal with the grief.
It is. It is. So I'm curious
A
what the
lot of
draw step
resources.
will be.
Some lands we have.
The Verdant Catacombs split card with Dryad Arbor.
Yeah. So getting the Dryad Arbor, then using the Dryad Arbor to sack towards Grist seems fine here. And this 1/1 insect token can start getting in.
Okay, well, gonna actually just keep Grist around. This token's
Interesting.
not gonna attack or anything. And what you can do here is, I mean, there's a triple block available.
Mhm.
Voidwalker's actually it's fine-ish. Again, Grist is on the battlefield, so it's not that big.
Yeah. Turning into this bit of a stalemate here. These insect tokens are doing a good job of just holding things down.
Yeah, it's turning into a bit of a grind. Which
Yeah.
the games in this matchup can go like this. It's not. I don't want to say it's uncommon, but I wouldn't say it's common either.
Yeah, for sure.
So no Soul
If
Culture activation from Jarvis. Just another Verdant Catacombs too. Okay.
this one does not get a Dryad Arbor.
Be, and I don't think Jarvis has another Surveil land.
Let me just check the deck this quickly. No, they only run the one, which is about enough. I think you can run in Yawgmoth.
So I think Jarvis is probably going to hold this Verdant Catacombs because I don't think he has much of a reason to play it. And now he's going to use Grist ability -2. Yeah, I got to kill the Voidwalker. There's a shadow. Jarvis is just going to play the Verdant Catacombs. I suppose you can
Okay.
sacrifice that and we'll just say thin the deck out of a land.
Speaking of lands, Jake Beardsley also draws a land. Not quite what you want to see in a top deck war. It's just lots of lands, but here we are.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a good attack here for Jake. So
No.
because even if there are creatures in the graveyard, again, the Soul Cauldron War, Jake moves first. Jarvis responds by removing the same thing, and then Jake's creature doesn't get a counter, so it's just going to be
It's very rock paper scissors with Soul Cauldrons right now.
Yeah, there's nothing really going on for either player here. So the first one to draw a pretty high impact card. I don't want to say it's going to
Probably
win the
wins it.
game, but is going to be advantaged.
There will be an advantage bar.
Yeah, imagine that. Okay, so Jake's going to make a move here with the Cauldron to make his grief a little bit larger. And now this is the moment where does Jarvis respond or not?
I think you have to, right?
Yep. So here's your response. It was an attempt to remove Voidwalker, and now Jarvis removes Voidwalker.
Jarvis gets a Voidwalker.
What this opens up is the ability for Jake to put a counter on the grief now, for sure, and that's one of the better draw steps.
It won the game last time, so probably going to run it back here. I think it's like a one-of in Jake's deck as well. Pretty impressive just drawing this high impact card every time.
Now again, don't forget that there is an answer on the battlefield, of course. There's a grist right there. The thing that this Shieldred is going to do is going to at least deal 2.
But it's going to eat up so many resources with this grist as well.
Yeah, and that's the big one.
Do you keep the grist around again? Like Jarvis had the option to remove it before. Like it's a lot of resources to deal with this high impact card.
All right, so here's the double. I'm going to trade the 2/2 and the 1/1 for the 4/3. Oh
Yes, because
that's
got
sick.
Yawgmoth. That's smart.
Oh, I missed that. Okay.
That's why Jake's a Pro Tour champion.
That was sick. There's a Yawgmoth underneath that Cauldron.
Yeah.
So that means that Grist is now 5/4.
With Menace.
Yep.
Jarvis also missed it. We all missed it, apparently.
Yeah, because remember, Jarvis could have just chump blocked with just 1.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, no.
So,
Grief has Menace.
Oh, no, it's Menace. Yeah, that's Menace. Never mind. Nope, you're right.
Because for some reason, Grief also has Menace.
Yep.
Just because it needs to. It's a lot of text.
It's got a lot of text right now.
That is questing beast levels of text, folks.
Yeah. Okay, so Jarvis going to take 2 and fall down to 11, and now we're on a Bowmasters.
Masters doesn't do a huge amount here outside of just stonewalling this grief. This inevitable shoulder that's going to turn sideways next turn.
So this is an opportunity here to you can play Bowmasters, like maybe like shoot Jake down to 5. I think you definitely want to cast Bowmasters now as opposed to waiting. You can shoot Jake down to 5. You make your army token. You sacrifice the army token. Maybe you go sacrifice the army token to kill one of these 2 creatures, and then you can remove the grist with Soul Cauldron because Jake's Soul Cauldron is gone. Okay, this is interesting.
Grist is being sacrificed.
Yeah, so this should be able to kill both creatures, I think. This is pretty good.
Yeah. It's been some really good back and forth in this game.
I'm gonna have to learn more of my Soul Cauldron Grist stuff now.
Yeah. It is a combo.
Here comes
Yeah.
Bowmaster. Yep.
Gonna chip at Jake to 5.
You get your army token, and then you
Cauldron the Grist.
Pauldron the Grist. Yep, which means that
Do it again.
which means your army has a +1/+1 counter. And you can put this on Bowmasters and decide what you want to do.
Yeah.
So now both those problems are solved. Or you make a couple of knuckleheads. Oh, never mind. I see what's going on. I see. So Jarvis is going, I'm not worried about Shieldred. I got 11 life. I'm sitting pretty. Let's just make a ton of insects and go that way.
And just hope Jake just doesn't draw anything to get him out of this.
Yeah, and I don't even know what Jake's best draw is right now. I promise it's not Thoughtseize.
Yeah. It's not. Look at Jarvis's hand, but it's not going to excite you. There is a lot of text on that Orcish Bowmasters.
There is. There's a lot going on with that one. No doubt about it.
Looks like Jarvis is pretty close to wrapping this up.
Yeah, I mean, Grist was phenomenal.
Yeah. Like, this Thoughtseize just doesn't do anything. And it's not worth losing the 2 life over, I don't think, considering.
No, I don't think so.
With the army of tokens and Grist abilities available, and Voidwalker abilities. Thinking if any way out.
Okay, so Soul Cauldron activation.
Okay. Taking the Haywire Might. Okay. There is can't use the Haywire Might Jake himself, just because he doesn't have access to green, but it's to stop Jarvis from cracking the Haywire Might.
This is about to proliferate, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So deal you 6, put you to 5. Shoulder trigger will put you to 3.
Let's see.
Okay.
A little bit of a standoff here.
Yeah, so Jarvis is going to, after he draws a card, fall down to 3. So Wall of Roots, draw. Looks like Jake is playing towards, it's like,
When he is because of Haywire Might.
yeah.
Shieldred has Haywire Might's abilities.
Yeah.
So bye Soul Cauldron.
Okay.
No more Grists.
Okay, so 7 to 3, play towards Lightning Bolt, I guess. All right, I'm at 2.
Huh?
Or excuse me, at 1.
Jake does have 2 lightning bolts if he hasn't sided them out.
All right, that may be a pretty sick deal.
That's not a lightning bolt.
That's not lightning bolt, but that is Jake playing to try to win, which I can certainly appreciate.
I can definitely respect that. And it looks like Jarvis is going to take this down with Golgari Yawgmoth. Proliferating. Jarvis is.
That's a really good third game.
That was a really fun third game.